distance in the lights, vibration of a thundercloud.
Hello, loved ones. This is Matt Stevens. This is the My Sober Addiction podcast. This is a re-recording of episode 18. I had already recorded this episode, and I was in the midst of editing it. Got about halfway through it, and set it aside. The lovely kitty came over. We spent the day together, whatever. And when I came back to it like a day or two later, it was all jacked up in the editing tool that I have. And my very limited knowledge of these kinds of things, I don't know how I could have recovered it. It was still there. It just, anyway, it was going to be very difficult to edit it. However, I kind of look at it as the creator's way of telling me to re-record it, because I kind of wanted to re-record it anyway. I had listened to it and I was not real happy with it, because unlike a lot of them where I just kind of have an outline with, speaking of which, there goes that, where I have just an outline, bullet points, I guess, that I kind of go off of. I'd actually written a pretty good piece on this one. And it's, for lack of a better term, I would call it a monologue. And I guess I was a little critical of myself on how I read it. It seemed a little robotic, maybe. It just didn't seem real natural. So I was like, I think I'm going to re-record that. But then I was like, well, maybe I won't. I'm going to go ahead and edit it, and we'll see what happens. But I'm thinking, well, maybe this is the creator's way of saying, yeah, go ahead and re-record it. I don't know. I just know that I was halfway through editing it, and it got jacked up, and here I am, re-recording it, as I wanted to do in the first place. So, there you go, loved ones. Hope everyone's well. So, this podcast is a labor of love. I do it for the love of people. The truth is, and I'm sure this is obvious, that I have always struggled with the spoken word. I'm a far better writer than speaker. How the podcast came to be was from a suggestion by my counselor, Sean Keenan. This man is a man who works in recovery because he clearly loves people too. I'm quite certain he doesn't have to do it. He's very smart, very well educated. So anyway, we were talking about how I had been writing a memoir of my time in active addiction, and he asked what I planned to do with it. He went on to talk about how blogging is completely saturated and difficult to get any traction if you're trying to get your message out and pursue it full time. YouTube is the same way. He said while podcasting is getting crowded and very competitive, it's still the least saturated. He suggested I research it and think of starting a podcast. I did research it, and I immediately fell in love with the idea. So here I am. Oh, but wait, Matt. There's still the issue of struggling with the spoken word, right? Thank God for editing tools. Except when they get jacked up and then you've got to figure something else out. There's probably a way to recover that. I'm just not that technically savvy. Is that a good way of putting it? So where do I go from here? Would you believe that I would like to get into public speaking now? Yeah, the guy with the struggling with the spoken word. Like lecturing, something of that nature. I think ultimately I want to continue the podcast and finish and publish my memoir, most likely self-publish. When I say I think I ultimately want to continue the podcast, I know I'm going to continue the podcast. So there's that. So I'm going to continue the podcast, and I'm going to finish the memoir and most likely self-publish it. And then I'm going to continue writing, because that's just what I do. I do plan to do more on YouTube, mainly just because you can't leave that out of your repertoire, but also to further promote the podcast and books. A good while back, I was wrestling with what to do with the memoir. And of course, I was doing the self-talk of, who are you? Nobody wants to read a memoir of you. You're blah, 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 all that. That negative self-talk. The kind of stuff that we have got to get out of. But that's a whole other subject. So I was wrestling with the idea of what to do with the memoir. Should I even continue? Questioning whether to finish it at all. I was just getting in the shower one night and I heard a very clear voice in my head or heart say, you have to finish this book, and because you also have to write another one about survivor's guilt. I was like, what? Excuse me? First of all, who the hell was that? Or what was that? And what do you mean I've got to finish this memoir and then write a book about survivor's guilt? Now, I realize this is a very niche audience, but that's actually a very good thing. I've always felt that my forte, my gift, is to reach addicts who are not still in active addiction, but to those who have gotten over that hump and are now looking at their lives like, okay, so now what? But we can also be examples to others, to normies, people who have never even thought about using drugs. The story of falling into addiction, all the issues that come with it, the mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual, all that stuff that comes with hitting rock bottom, often multiple times, the struggle with getting sober, and then the real fun begins, of course, the struggle with staying sober, and then to finally coming out on the other end as a free person, free from addiction, and trying to build a life. When there's nothing to lose, you got to go for broke. Addicts can very much be an inspiration, obviously to each other, but also to others who are just maybe struggling with whatever. Life can be hard on people sometimes, especially if they have no support. Addicts can be an inspiration and a testament to what we humans are capable of. Some of the smartest, most talented people I've ever known, I knew during a time in their lives when they were 100% slaves to dope. We may think, well, that's not very smart. But really, it isn't about intelligence, possibly about poor decision making. But really, that is a subject I advise we stay away from, at least for now. Suffice to say, it's one of those situations of, if you know, then you know. You know? So, when you mix intelligence, talent, with nothing to lose, and it wouldn't be me if I didn't say, could we even throw in a little detachment from outcome? You mix those together, then you get someone with immense potential. It's amazing, really. Maybe, just maybe, the fact they have already flirted with death, maybe even looked death in the eye, makes them more fearless. And what some people who have lived cautiously would consider reckless. Whatever the case, we have every reason to go for it and make something of ourselves. Leave our mark. Make a difference in the world. Surely we were spared for some reason. Just to be an inspiration to others is an awesome purpose. There are some cases where people had very, quote-unquote, checkered pasts, to say the least. Criminal records that all but guarantee to never get a, again, quote-unquote, decent job. There are cases where someone would say, thank God for my record preventing me from getting a decent job. They were forced to make their way, start a business of some sort, the possibilities are virtually limitless, and ended up doing way better than they'd have ever done at a decent job. Now, I'm not poo-pooing having a decent job, but there are those people who want to blaze a trail. They want to make their own way, and that's great. And there are those people who don't have any choice but to do that because of their criminal records. And then there are those cases where that has happened, and you're like, thank God for my criminal record, preventing me from getting a decent job, because now I have a business, and I'm way happier and making more money and all that good stuff than I would have ever been. The biggest issue is breaking addicts out of the druggy mentality, or worse, being institutionalized. That's when they don't know anything but being in some sort of institution, be it jail or rehab, prison. They just don't assimilate back into society. They only know how to live in an institution. And that is a very tough nut to crack. But big challenge with a lot of people is breaking them out of the druggy mentality. It's sad, both sad and kind of funny, and it makes you roll your eyes all at the same time. The normies listening probably not have seen this, but druggies, even after they've been sober for, and these are needle users, by the way, even after they've been sober a pretty good while, might still catch themselves just curiously looking at their veins on their arms or their hands or whatever. Just curious, seeing if they've got a good vein. And somebody might be like, why would somebody do that? If you ask that question, then you don't know what I'm talking about, and God bless you. But those that do know what I'm talking about, know what I'm talking about. Not going to get into that. It's just an observation that I've made. Now that I've gone through that big spill, some of my random thoughts on what I want to do with myself, how I'm going to move forward with my sober addiction, and the memoir, which is titled Welcome Back. And I have read parts of that on previous episodes, and I'm going to get back to being very serious about writing it. It's kind of funny. I heard a thing about writers who say, and these are some people who are very good writers, who say that they hate to write, but they love to have written. And I totally get that, because there's times when I'm thinking about writing, I really need to. There's a lot I need to put down, and I'm like, oh my God, it's so grueling, because it just sometimes it just is. And then doing it is, again. However, when you get finished with whatever you're writing, you're really glad you did it. So that's where I'm going with this. Now, as promised, because I'd been getting very woo-woo and talking about a lot of weird stuff lately, off the deep end spiritually, that's fine. I don't care. I was going to tell some jail stories, because everybody loves jail stories. They're funny. Now, a little disclaimer here. Please understand, I love Jewish people. In fact, that's how I knew how to do this. So the last time I went to jail, pretty much every time I went to jail, was in Cincinnati at the Hamilton County Justice Center, also known as the JC. They give you whatever for breakfast. It's a hot breakfast. It sucks. Of course, it's jail food. And then for lunch, again, it's a hot lunch. It sucks. Of course, it's jail food. And then for dinner, every night of the freaking year, does not matter, without fail, it's bologna sandwiches and either like a cookie or a piece of fruit, or whatever, like 2 bologna sandwiches. And that's it, every single night of your life. And the food's terrible. So I think, well, the last time I was there, I'm going to try to get a kosher tray. So when I'm in intake and I'm sitting there with the nurses doing the intake interview, we get to the part about diet. And she asks us if I have any dietary restrictions. Now, they're usually looking for people who are diabetics. But I said, well, I eat kosher when I'm able. And she looks at the other nurse and is like, do we do kosher? And she says, yeah, we do. So she comes over and she shows her on the screen. Here it is. She's like, okay, it's in there. I'm like, well, here we go. I don't know what I'm getting into. I really don't. But I'm going to go with it. And I'm thinking, no matter how bad it is, it's got to be better than that. Well, it did turn out to be pretty good, because I got peanut butter for every single breakfast. I got real fruit juice at every meal instead of fruit drink or whatever that is. It was just really good. And then for dinners, when most people were getting those bologna sandwiches and whatever else they got with that, a cookie or a piece of fruit or whatever, I was actually getting a microwave meal and a piece of fruit and a juice. That worked out pretty good, except for the fact that when you have a kosher tray, you kind of have to keep up the persona. Now, I never outright told anyone, yes, I'm Jewish or whatever, because I wasn't going to do that. But I told them, yeah, I got a kosher tray. What is that? It's a Jewish diet. It's based on the Old Testament. So there's that. But the thing is when there's Aryan Brotherhood guys in the pod with you, yes, those are Nazis. Those are people who absolutely hate Jews. They are full-blown Nazis with the swastika tattoos and all that good stuff. So you're sitting here with the kosher tray. Not to mention, I have what most people would refer to as a Jewfro. I have the curly hair, so yeah. Especially if there's no product in it, and guess what? There's no hair product in jail. Anywho, so here I am trying to maintain that persona. Meanwhile, I've got a couple of Aryan Brotherhood guys thinking I'm Jewish. Thankfully, I had enough other people who liked me, because I'm just such a likable guy, right? That's why you're here, right? Anyway, that didn't go as badly as it possibly could have. There was some hate, how do you get that, blah, blah, blah. And I just tell them, it's a kosher tray. I mean, don't be mad at me. I mean, the diabetics get all kinds of extra food. Like, they bring them extra, like, peanut butter sandwiches every night. But also with like I said, I got peanut butter every morning with my breakfast. And I got fresh fruit. And a lot of people want those, because peanut butter is a commodity in jail, because a lot of guys are working out pretty hard and they need protein in any way they can get it. Well, I wanted caffeine any way I could get it. So I would trade my peanut butter for shots of coffee. And it wasn't a whole lot of peanut butter. It was like those little white paper cups that you could put ketchup in at a fast food joint, whatever. I'd get 2 of those every morning. And I could trade one of those off for like 2 or 3 shots of coffee, which is basically a spoonful, enough for a cup. So I had plenty of coffee. But the thing is, they would get the coffee from the commissary, which is the Folgers instant, and you just mix it in with some hot water from the shower, and there you go. Well, sometimes, if it's maybe getting close to the end of the 2-week period or whatever it is when they do commissary, and some of these guys, I don't know why they would do it, but they would make a thing called Foxy. Now, I don't know if this is big everywhere or if it's just a Ohio thing or it may just be a Cincinnati thing. I don't know. But Foxy is when they would take instant coffee and instant Kool-Aid. And I do not believe they could choose the flavor. It would probably be like cherry or fruit punch or whatever flavors they had. So they would take instant coffee and instant Kool-Aid, I guess 50-50, mix them together. And that is a Foxy. But what's really kind of messed up is they would go ahead and pre-mix the stuff. And I'm guessing maybe to sweeten the coffee, but it's still like cherry coffee or fruit punch coffee. But when you want that caffeine bad enough, you'll drink it. So there would be times where I'd be like, hey, anybody want to trade me? I got an apple. Anybody want to trade me a shot of coffee for it? I'd be like, yeah, I'll do it, but all I got is Foxy. Okay. And if it was down to the end where nobody had it, that's take what you can get, right? So yeah, Foxy. Usually when I tell people about that, they're like, what? Coffee and Kool-Aid? Yes, coffee and Kool-Aid. Foxy. It's a thing. Now, another thing about the kosher tray is I was always able to have food to trade, not just for coffee, but I could pitch in on the break, which I know in Kentucky they call it a blow up. In Ohio, it's called a break. It's where you and maybe another guy will grab all the food you got either off your commissary or off your trays, and you just kind of mix it all together and see what you can come up with. It's basically jail cuisine. What they do a lot of times is they make nachos because you can get Doritos, or I've even seen them take the ramen noodles, kind of how it comes in like a brick, and kind of break those off into flakes, and where it pretty much is like chips. And then they put whatever meat, whatever proteins they can get, be it beef jerky off the commissary or tuna pouches off the commissary, or maybe Matt with his kosher tray over there threw in a chicken patty from his microwave meal from dinner. He threw me in on it a little bit, so there's that. And maybe some vegetables if there was some like mixed vegetables from the lunch. Whatever. You get it. You put a thing of Doritos down or whatever. But the part that was most impressive to me was the nacho cheese, or what they called squeeze cheese. Squeeze cheese is when they take spicy Cheez-It, crush them up into pretty much a powder, put them in a baggie. Then they take the spicy Big Papa pickle. Those gigantic pickles are in like a plastic pouch with all the juice in there. Well, yeah, you get a spicy one of those. You take the pickle juice and you mix it in with the now powdered spicy Cheez-Its, and you put just enough in to where it and then you mix it together and all that good stuff. You may need to add a little more of the Cheez-It or a little more of the pickle juice, whatever. Figure it out. So you work it out in that baggie. Eventually, it's the consistency of nacho cheese. And then you cut the corner off the bag and you kind of pipe it onto your nachos there, just like a baker does when they're decorating a cake. And I'm telling you, that squeeze cheese that they make is so damn good. It's ridiculous. Now, maybe it's just because you've been in jail and you haven't had anything good in a while, but I would argue that could contend with some of the real nacho cheese that you get at like ball games or whatever. Seriously. Spicy Cheez-It and spicy Big Papa pickle juice. Just getting the right consistency, that's just practice, right? My bunkie, he was a drug dealer. Little side note, how funny is it? You put drug dealers and druggies together, living together in a pod. What could happen? Nothing. They just make new connections so that when they hit the street again, they've got a new dealer and all that good stuff. Unless, of course, they get their lives together. Or if they go to prison. Things happen. But a lot of connections are made in jail. Just a little side note that's kind of ironic. So what I was saying about addicts are some of the smartest people I've ever known, and they really are. And if you're not an addict, but you're listening because maybe one of your loved ones is, you probably know exactly what I'm saying. I've heard so many people say it about their loved ones who are addicts. Like, he's so smart, or she's so intelligent, she's always blah, blah, blah. Can figure out anything, can do anything, can do this, can do that. It's rather amazing. So, like with regards to like the squeeze cheese and things like that, I'm like, man, if you guys would put forth this much effort, ingenuity, whatever, into doing good things with your life than trying to figure out how to make nachos in jail, then you probably wouldn't be here, right? I mean, it's just kind of funny to me. It's like, you guys are actually freaking smart. What's up? You've decided to get your ingenuity working now that you finally made it, now that you're in jail. No, do that on the street. Here's a little idea for someone if they want to jump on it, because I think it's a great idea. Food trucks are like the big thing now, right? A jail food truck, like a break or a blow up food truck, where you actually take things like ramen noodles and whatever, make squeeze cheese nachos, sell that crap, sell that stuff on the street. Dude, people would buy it. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. People who've never been to jail would buy it because they're just curious. And then they probably see, wow, that's actually pretty good. The sodium content is probably in outer space somewhere, but it's good. And then guys who have been to jail, just kind of nostalgic, like, whatever. Maybe want to show their loved ones. Check this out. Here's the kind of crap we ate. Like I saw a meme once. It showed like a stack of little Debbie cakes, ho-hos and Twinkies and, whatever. Showed like a stack of Debbie cakes. And then it took on one side, and then on the other side, it showed this huge, beautiful, like just gourmet cake. I mean, it was really nice. And the meme went something like, if he can take this and make this, then he's been to jail. And that's pretty true, because they get very creative and come up with some concoctions that are amazing. And then if you really think about it, you're like, why are you here? You're so smart. Why are you here? And then it kind of goes back to the whole thing about being institutionalized. Some people don't know how to not be there. I've seen people who in jail, like, let's say you're in intake and you're just chilling. In my case, I was usually laying there dope sick and couldn't move, because if I moved, I would throw up. But you see one guy, he's sitting here, whatever. Another guy walks up. Hey, man, what's up? Turns out they're like cousins or whatever. And how's your mom doing? Oh, she's good. Oh, yeah, I haven't seen her since I had family reunion last year. Oh, yeah, I was locked up during that, man. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, you guys are in jail. And it's like nothing to it. And that is such a issue. I really think that we, humanity, need to work on those kinds of things. When I was in court-ordered rehab, which this trip I went to jail, I told you about, ended with me going to rehab. And we had like a book study club that was directed by one of the counselors there. And we read a book called the Epictetus Club. Epictetus was a philosopher, like an ancient Greek philosopher. God, I'm probably messing this all the way up. But not unlike Socrates or Plato or whatever. But he was a little lesser known, I guess. You can definitely Google it. It's definitely there. But in the Epictetus Club, it was based on a true story about these guys who were in prison together in Ohio. In the book, they were a group of guys who were studying Epictetus. And like every Friday night, they would get together and discuss what they had been reading that week in Epictetus's teachings. And in part of the book, the part that stood out to me the most, I think, or one of the parts anyway, was the guy that kind of ran the group asked the rest of the group, what percentage of the population do you think is incarcerated? Now, these are guys who are probably hardened criminals and been in prison for a while. Some of them thought like 5 or 10% of the population. I believe it said that even one guy thought that half of the population was incarcerated in some form at all times. And that just shows you the mentality, because the truth is it's less than 1%. Less than 1% of the population of America or whatever is incarcerated at any time. But they don't know any other way. They can't imagine that there is any other way. Hence, that's why there's a guy that thought, I believe it was 50%. He literally thought 50% of the population was incarcerated. It's like, seriously? I mean, shit, where do you think all these guards come from? So what do you think, everybody's either incarcerated or they work in the justice system? Whatever. But that's just it. They get so ingrained in their heads that they don't know any different. And that's what being institutionalized is. And then when they get out, they look at normal people. They don't know how to do it. They don't understand it. It's a foreign lifestyle to them. And, like getting sober is very much like that. Somebody may not, I was never institutionalized because I knew what being institutionalized was. I was in there with a lot of people who were institutionalized. And because I put my awareness on that, I knew what I did not want to be. Remaining sober or not being sober is a lot like that. Once we've done drugs for so long, we don't know how to not be on drugs. You hear a lot of addicts who always talk about, yeah, in the beginning it was great. I got high. I felt great, And then you always hear the story about how it's never like that first time. They're always chasing how it felt that first time. And there's some truth to that. Not exactly, but it's true enough where we can go with it. So like in my case, I was like, I know how to get sober. I just don't know how to stay sober. And that became my goal, to learn how to stay sober. Getting sober and staying sober are completely different things. It's a lot like being institutionalized. I know I lost track there for a second. You hear a lot of guys who say it was great in the beginning and yada, yada, yada. And then eventually they say things like, I don't even get high anymore. I just use to feel normal. I just use so that I don't get dope sick or whatever. I used to say it. I used to use heroin every day, and I felt like I don't get high. All I do is I don't go into withdrawal. But I believe now, reflecting back, that the truth is I was high. I just didn't know what not being high felt like. Being high was so normal to me. I believe. I don't know, because it did feel completely normal to me. But looking back, I'm like, I had to have been high. I just didn't know what not being high was. It was either high or in withdrawal. But I don't think that what we would consider to be normal existed. There may have been a little couple of hours there maybe between when the high wore off and before the withdrawal kicked in. Maybe. I don't know. But that's a lot like being institutionalized. And that's one of the problems with getting people clean, getting people sober, and keeping them sober, is they don't know how to not be high. Or they don't know how, just like they don't know how to not be in an institution of some sort. So to me, I think that's kind of the challenge for those of us who are trying to save lives, build trust back in relationships and things like that. There's so many families out there that miss their loved ones. And I'm talking about the ones that are still alive. I know that we all know people who have passed away from this freaking disease. And yes, it is a disease. It's a total disease. I've known people who can do it for the weekend. They party down, catch a buzz, have fun with it. And then Sunday night, they're like, yep, I got to knock it off. I got to work tomorrow. An addict doesn't know. That's not how we roll. We can't do that. We don't know how to knock it off. We don't know how to use just to have a little fun over the weekend, catch a buzz and all that kind of stuff. Now, I mean, yes, it can be argued that that's very dangerous because then you never have any tolerance, whatever. That's not my point. My point is there are people who can use and not get addicted. I mean, they would eventually if they kept at it. But the point is they're not predisposed to do it. Some people are predisposed to just be addicts. That's why you got to be so vigilant. Most of us addicts, that's how we are. That's why we can't do anything. What's the saying in NA? Once is too many and 1,000 times is never enough. It's so true. Once is too many, 1,000 times is never enough because we don't know moderation. So, anywho, loved ones, yeah, I said this was a re-record, and I do feel like this was a whole lot more natural than the other one that I had that then got messed up in the editing tool. If this one gets messed up in the editing tool, I'm not going to throw anything. This damn equipment costs too much. It's too damn expensive to be throwing anything, but I may throw a fit. That's always possible, right? I've got lots of other things I want to talk about. Still reading Conversations with God. I'm on book 2 now. It is blowing my freaking mind. It's unbelievable. I heard a really funny story from a friend at work about one of his trips to jail. Well, it's not funny at all. I mean, shit, somebody died, but whatever. I'll tell that soon enough. Well, I'll go ahead and tell it now. What happened was a friend of mine went to jail. I think he was there for DUI, and he was in intake, I believe. They put him in this cell with this guy, and he said this guy was an older guy. He was from somewhere from South America, and he was coughing and hacking like crazy, just coughing, really bad. This was before COVID, so he was in there with them about 10 or 15 minutes. They came and pulled him out. It was like, maybe you just need to come out here and sit. Okay, so he's sitting out there, maybe watching TV, whatever. A little time goes by. Next thing you know, the guy that he was in there with for 10 or 15 minutes, the guy that was coughing his head off, died. He actually passed away. Come to find out, he had tuberculosis. Yeah. How's that for a close call? Wow. So, there's that one. All right, loved ones. My name is Matt Stevens. This is the My Sober Addiction podcast, and I will be back. I've got some really good stuff to talk about. In fact, I'm really hoping I can get this one out pretty quick so I can go ahead and get the next one going. I already know what I'm going to do, and I am so excited to do it. I'm going to read something that is going to be very freaking cool, so don't miss this being episode 18. Do not miss episode 19. I love you all. I will be back directly.
There is a distance in the light.